What up, everybody? Welcome to this brand new episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our wonderful friends from Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Love our good friends from Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Hey, before we get going, before we talk a little college hockey and a little college hoops, I want to remind you, follow, subscribe to the Man Cave Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast or on YouTube. And if you listen on Spotify or Apple, if you could leave us a positive review on Apple and a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify, that helps others be able to find the Man Cave Podcast. So I just want to throw that out there like I do at the beginning of every episode of the podcast. Badgers taking on the Buckeyes of Ohio State for the national championship in Minnesota. And third period with under 20 seconds left to go, Badgers down 1. And maybe Badger fans, maybe even I would imagine some of the players on the team, a little bit nervous, but the Badgers get a penalty shot. And Kirsten Sims, I mean, the move that she made, I mean, to completely fake out the goalie, I mean, that was sweet. Reminded me of the Triple Deke and Mighty Ducks in that, her own version in that. But with less than 20 seconds left, Sims scores the game-tying goal to force overtime, and then she gets the putback in overtime to secure the national championship for the Badger women's hockey team, a women's hockey team that has just been absolutely dominant from start to finish throughout this season. I mean, how many times have we chatted with RJ on Tuesdays, and we just kind of like, yeah, what else do we say about Badger women's hockey? And, you know, it was like them versus the field. It was just, they were so flipping dominant throughout this whole season. And, you know, national title game was close. I mean, what do you expect between, especially considering how we've seen these two teams play against each other this year too? But it was close. It was dramatic. It was exciting. It was heartbreaking if you're Ohio State and those players when you're just literally seconds away from potentially winning the national championship, and to just heartbreak afterwards. So it's definitely heartbreaking for them. But, I mean, you want to talk about a wave of emotions for the Badgers and for everybody involved in that. I mean, I don't know how they're probably still up. I don't think I would be able to go to sleep after something like that. And just, you know, the adrenaline would be so flipping high at an all-time high for me. There's no way I'd be able to calm down after that. So, but what a fantastic and entertaining game yesterday early evening between those two. And then, you know, you look at 8th national championship for that team, for that program, under head coach Mark Johnson. And I know we once in a while, whether it's a barstool conversation, a chat in the man cave, or just a little debate, a friendly banter that goes back and forth, gets thrown out there, probably gets overplayed once in a while. But when you talk about your Mount Rushmores, whether it's a Packers Mount Rushmore, a Brewers Mount Rushmore, a baseball Mount Rushmore, or in this case a Wisconsin sports Mount Rushmore, you know, we've all had that discussion. We've all probably had it multiple times. Multiple times. But here's the thing, and I'm guilty of this too, but considering the career from playing to coaching, I think you got to put Mark Johnson, if he hasn't already been on there. I know some people have already had him on there, and that's good. That's great. That's awesome. I'm guilty of not. But I think it's time that you got to put that guy on the Mount Rushmore of Wisconsin sports, in my opinion. And when you factor in, you know, everything from his playing career to what he has done as a coach, I mean, the guy is Scotty through and through. Playing high school in Madison Memorial High, playing for the Badgers. And then when he's done with his pro career, playing a little international too, and then comes back to Wisconsin as assistant coach for the men's team, then gets hired as the women's head coach in 2002, and so far has amassed a career win percentage as a coach of .825, 667 wins, 120 losses, 55 ties, 825 win percentage, 8 national champions, 10-time WCHA regular season champion, 10-time WCHA tournament champion, 10 times WCHA Coach of the Year, 5 times AHCA Coach of the Year. Won just this season, first time since 2011 for that one. But the 8 national champions, and then you go into his 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey resume, for crying out loud, being a star player on that, being named the team MVP for that, shining in that game against Russia with 2 goals. I mean, you factor in everything. Mark Johnson deserves to be on a Wisconsin sports Mount Rushmore if we haven't put him on there already. And I'll admit it, I'm guilty of not putting him on there. Especially because when I get into these chats or debates or topics, whatever you want to call it, I try to always pick one from the big 4. One to represent the Packers, one to represent the Brewers, one to represent the Bucks, and then one to either represent the Badgers or if we want to put all colleges together, throw Marquette in there and such. And, I mean, you could do it. It's a debate. It's a tough debate when you get to a Packers Mount Rushmore because, you've got so many iconic figures to choose from. Whether it's a player or a coach or even an executive. Brewers, you throw them in there too. And that gets, I think a lot of us would probably have 3 of the 4 similar to the Brewers. But, you got Euchre in there. And then you got Robin Yount. You throw in, if you want to do the Milwaukee Braves part of it, you throw in Hank and such. And then you get to the Bucks. And that one's kind of like, okay, do you go Lou Alcindor or Kareem? Or the Big O, or is Giannis that guy right now? And then you get to the Badgers, it's like, well, it could be Barry Alvarez, it could be Bo Ryan. I think for me, it's Mark Johnson, considering what he has done. And when you factor in everything, just when we talk about Wisconsin sports figures in a Mount Rushmore, I think I've got to put Mark Johnson on there. For the resume, for the career that he has had, and if he continues, dude could get up to 10 national championships if he wants to. If he wants to continue to coach for a few years and such, I wouldn't be shocked if he gets double-digit national championships for crying out loud. The guy, when you think about women's hockey, he is the guy. When you think about Badger hockey right now, to me, he is the guy at the top. And so I've put together my kind of Scotty Mount Rushmore here, and it's tough. It's tough. I'll admit it. And we could go, there's no right or wrong answer in this. This is what a friendly sports banter debate is all about. And I'd love to hear what yours would be, to see if we have any similarities. So shoot them to me. Send them to me, okay? So it's got to be 4, right? It's got to be 4 if you know your Mount Rushmore. Who are your 4 on that Mount Rushmore? And is Mark Johnson on there? Has he always been on there for you, or are you now putting him on there? So we all have different rules, again, different guidelines in that. And again, it doesn't have to be like this for everybody, but for me, I try to pick one that represents each team or organization or sport or whatever. So in this case, I went with Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, but Badgers / college / Marquette and such. So Mark Johnson's on there for me for the Badgers for all the reasons we just are talking about with Mark Johnson right now. And I do factor in what he did in his playing career, especially when you talk about the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team. When you look at Wisconsin sports, okay, Wisconsin sports, this guy is through and through Wisconsin. So, yes, Mark Johnson's on there for me. I put Euchre on there for me for the Brewers. I know it's not a player. I mean, technically it played for the Milwaukee Braves and that. But when we think of Euchre, we obviously think about him as a radio broadcaster. I mean, the ambassador of the Milwaukee Brewers, for crying out loud. If you want to go player, that is perfectly fine. If you want to go Robin Yount, that is perfectly fine. If you want to go Hanker, that is perfectly fine. But for me, on my personal Scotty, Mount Rushmore, I'm going with Euchre because I still, and it probably will be like this for years to come. For me personally, when I think of the Brewers, I'm going to think of Bob Euchre. So he's on there for me. And again, there's no rules to this. It doesn't have to be a player. It doesn't have to be a coach. It doesn't have to be an executive. It could be whatever you want. But for me, a Wisconsin sports figure, I'm going with Euchre. I mean, Packers, that could be multiple people, right? I mean, it could be all over the place. Maybe you've got players. Maybe you're going to go with Favre. Maybe you're going to go with White. Maybe you're going to go with Starr. Maybe you're going to go with Rodgers. Maybe you're going to go with Don Hudson. I did not go with Don Hudson. Maybe you're going to go with Curly Lambeau, Ron Wolf, Bob Harlan. I went with Lombardi, which is probably not that far-fetched and probably not that far off from a lot of people's picks over there. You can go with Lambeau because of, the dude, helped fund the team and the organization, and you look at the coaching wins and obviously player-wise too. Lambeau, easy pick, and you're not going to get an ounce of argument from me with that one. But I think when you think about the Packers, with all of their glory and all of their history and all of the different people that have gone through that organization for over the 100 years of existence that they've been around, you still, I think the majority still think about Lombardi. You still think about his quotes. I mean, the impact that Lombardi has still had on everyday people and organizations, businesses, and such. I mean, to me, it's when I think about Packers, I think about Lombardi. So to me, I've got to put him on that Mount Rushmore to kind of represent the Packers, if you will, bringing them back to. I mean, they were awful before he got there. We all know the history. I don't need to give you all a history lesson and such. But what he meant to that franchise. And if you just, I don't know if anybody has read the When Pride Still Mattered book. And just to kind of get a glimpse, if you weren't around back then like I wasn't, and just kind of get a glimpse and a feel of what he meant to the entire state of Wisconsin and the fan base for the Packers. It's pretty amazing. So, yeah, I've got Lombardi on there. And then I'll tell you what, my fourth one on here, because, again, this is just my rules. It doesn't have to be everybody's rules. But for my guidelines here, I want to pick somebody to represent the Bucks. I mean, you could maybe somebody's Mount Rushmore is all Badgers or all Packers, or it's just Packers and Brewers. Again, doesn't matter. But for me, personally, I wanted to get somebody on here who reps the Bucks on here. So it's between Giannis and Kareem. I think for some they may go Kareem, which I get it. I understand it. You look at it, played with the Bucks from 69 to 75. Won a championship in 71 with the Bucks. Finals MVP. He won a couple of MVPs, 3 MVPs while he was with the Bucks? Yeah, 71, 72, 74. So you look at that. I've gone back and forth on this one. I might go Giannis, though, and maybe that's a little bit more of a recency thing for me, but when I think about, and I don't know what Giannis's career, how he's going to finish it off. I mean, I think if he plays his entire career with the Bucks, then I don't think there's any question. I don't think there's any question that Giannis is probably thought of as Mr. Buck. But when you think about the Milwaukee Bucks, who you think of? And maybe some go with Herb Cole. Or maybe you're going to go with Moncrief or Marcus Johnson, or like I mentioned earlier, the Big O. There's a few different options you can go with in this thing. But I think right now maybe this is a little bit more kind of projecting it a little bit. But I think I'm going to go Giannis. And he won 4, was it 3? 3 of his MVPs he won with the Bucks. So half of them he won with the Bucks. He won one of his 6 championships with the Bucks. I mean, he's got the resume to go over there in a very short time period with the Bucks. But I think it's close, but maybe just by a fingernail I might go Giannis. So my Scotty Sportsman, or Scotty, how do I want to say this? Wisconsin Sports Rushmore, Scotty Sports Mount Rushmore. I'm going Lombardi. I'm going Euchre. I'm going to go Giannis. And now I'm going to go Mark Johnson. I mean, I think, if you were on that fence or maybe just kind of overlooked it, and hey, I admit it, I overlooked him quite a few times. He was in the conversation, maybe even top 10. But when I think about it, when you look at the resume and you look at everything surrounding Mark Johnson, including the playing career, which I think you have to in this case. And there's a lot of great options to choose from if we look at Badger history. You could throw in Ron Dane. You throw in Barry Alvarez. You throw in Bo Ryan. You can throw in, if you want to go Frank the Tank Kaminsky or whatever. There's a lot of different players, coaches, and players in different sports or even Olympians, right? You can throw in Wisconsin Olympians for this. There is no right or wrong answer for this. But I think when I look at the overall, like Eric Hayden's going to be thrown in there and absolutely probably deserves to be on there for a lot of people. But I guess for my Mount Rushmore for Wisconsin sports, I got to throw Mark Johnson in there. And, I mean, just what an impressive. Even if he did get into coaching, he'd still be talked about because of what he did in the 80 Olympics and how much he meant to that team. And, I mean, for crying out loud, when we talk about I wasn't around in 1980, but I know about 1980. I know what happened. I know the significance of that. And whenever we get to the anniversary, you still have people talking about it. We hear stories of how people either listened to it on the radio, how they watched about it, or watched it on TV. I mean, we all know Al Michaels' call for crying out loud. Even if you weren't around, we know about it. And to know Mark Johnson was a big part of that, even if he didn't get in coaching, we'd still be talking about him. But then you add in what he has done as a coach for this Badger women's hockey team. It's dominant. It's dominant. It's one of the most dominant coaching careers in collegiate sports history. You throw it up there with Gino Auriemma. You throw it up there with John Wooden. You throw it up there with Coach K. You throw it up there with all these other dominant tenures as a coach. Mark Johnson's name is up there, and I get it. Hockey, probably not going to get the same attention as basketball. Probably not going to get the same attention as college football. It's not. But when we look at it and you look at the resume that he has built, Mark Johnson, no question, should be mentioned as one of the most dominant, impressive, best, however you want to say it, coaching careers in college history. The facts are facts, and numbers don't lie. Dude has just been absolutely amazing. What are yours, though? All right, let's just have a little fun here on this Monday morning. I know you're probably just getting up and getting, another work week here, and Badger basketball's out, and my bracket's busted, and blah. So let's begin the Monday with a little fun banter. Who would be on yours? Is Mark Johnson now on yours? Maybe not. Maybe you're going Lambo, or maybe you're just like, hey, I'm not the biggest hockey one, so I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to go, Lombardi and Starr and Euchre and Yount. That's fine. What are yours, though? Let me know. How do you assess this past season for the Badgers? for this Badger basketball team, how do you assess this past season? Because I think honestly, it's like two different waves a little bit. Season, I think, regular season surpassed a ton of expectations. And the reason I say we surpassed a ton of expectations, because we didn't know what the heck the team was going to look like a year ago from today with Storr transferring and Chucky Hepburn transferring. Or like, are we going to have anybody left? Especially, in the backcourt maybe. You had John Blackwell, but then it's like, okay, but who else? Okay, McGee, we got this young kid, Deanna Freitag, that everybody's talking about, but is he going to have to play right away? And then, later on, it's this guy named John Tonjay's coming over. Like, who? Okay, whatever. Didn't really have any expectations for him. So, I mean, I think the regular season just, surpassed all the expectations in the world. But it was a disappointing finish. And I'm a believer that expectations could change throughout a season. So, as the season progressed and as, at the end of the Big Ten Conference Tournament, at the end of the regular season, I thought this Badger team had a Sweet 16 roster. Talented enough to be a Sweet 16 caliber roster. But like every year, when you get to the tournament, it's all depending on matchups and who they're going up against. And when the bracket was revealed on Selection Sunday and we all looked at that possible second-round matchup of Wisconsin versus BYU, we all knew that was going to be potentially a tough game for Wisconsin if Wisconsin were to beat Montana and if BYU were to beat VCU. Well, it happened. And we saw on Saturday a lot of the reasons why we thought that was going to be a tough game. Credit to BYU. They came out with a ton of energy right away. They made their threes. They were aggressive on offensive boards early on. And the game was a little chippy. It was a little chippy. But, I mean, tip your cap to BYU and tip your cap to, Wisconsin second half. They put themselves in a position with the final shot to either tie it or maybe win it and couldn't get it done. So they're not in the Sweet 16. And, boy, did that sound like a BYU crowd. Holy crap, if you were watching that game. And I know a lot of people were like, kind of bringing up the Milwaukee thing again, that Wisconsin should have been in Milwaukee in that. But when you look at this, the best way I think I personally could sum up this season for Badger basketball is it exceeded expectations, at least for me. It was a great season, regular season, with a disappointing finish in the postseason. Because I really thought, and I still believe this is a team that has Sweet 16 talent. Has the talent to be a Sweet 16 team. To me, is a top 16 team in the country. But again, it's just based off matchups. And it's who you play in the bracket. But it stinks overall, too, because we only got to see, as for Badger fans, John Tonjay for one season. And I know you get that once in a while with players, whether it's a freshman, that's a one and done. But, John Tonjay was a transfer guy heading into his fifth year, and we didn't know anything about him when he came over. Let's be real. We didn't really know a whole lot about him. We didn't expect him to be the leading scorer or this, guy that was just going to score 37 points in this game. And he did it how many times this season with just dominating performances. So it stinks that we only get to see John Tonjay for 1 year. I don't know, and I don't think Blackwell is going to leave or go to the NBA or transfer, but that's the thing where we're at now with college sports and college basketball is now we're seeing, but the transfer portal I believe opens today, so you got these teams who are still competing in the Sweet 16, trying to get ready for a game, but they're also like trying to still recruit the guys that are still on their team and still playing, so it's just such a mess, and it's frustrating. And it's frustrating from the standpoint of, like, now I'm sitting here worried, and I'm sure I'm not the only Badger fan that's worried about this. Like, is Blackwell going to be back next year? Is he going to get a bigger NIL deal elsewhere to go over there and get cashed in? What about some of the other guys? I don't know who's going to be back. And that's a frustrating part of it too. Like, at least in 14, after that team fell short of getting to the national championship, there was some like, okay, is Frank going to go to the draft? There was some talk about that, maybe a little bit with Decker. But then they're like, no, we're going to come back for 1 year. And then they're like, okay, we go. We had expectations. The hype was there for next year. We knew what to expect for next year. We knew what the goals were. I have no idea what this team is going to look like for next year. It's just because of the overall landscape and the change of college sports and in college basketball. It's just this big old question mark year in and year out. And I know Calipari talked about this after they beat St. John's, with the whole transfer portal thing. Like, they're trying to prepare for a game. And now they got to, try to recruit some of their own players. Hey, you going to stick around? You going to come back next year? When they're trying to focus on Texas Tech. Like, I don't envy some of these coaches. I don't envy some of this stuff that's going on. Especially these guys now that are trying to prepare for getting to the Elite Eight. It's kind of a mess. And honestly, I feel like unless they change these dates with this transfer portal stuff, it's going to be like this for a while. I would wish they would do that, but does anybody have confidence in the NCAA at this point? I don't know if I do. But overall, Wisconsin, back to Wisconsin basketball. It was a fun season. It was a good season with a disappointing finish. And I know as soon as that game was over with on Saturday night, you had a lot of finger pointing, at least on social media, and a lot of finger pointing going to Greg Gard. And I, you had the talk leading into that game too was like, you had a lot of people saying, man, I hope Greg Gard can get to a Sweet 16 with his own guys. And I understand that narrative, and I understand that talking point. Like, it's like, because the first couple Sweet 16s, yes, he was an assistant when those guys came and then took over for Bo Ryan. But I would argue that Greg Gard was still a part of those recruiting staffs, was still the main recruiter for those guys too. Okay, it wasn't like he was an outsider coming into this program and just inheriting these players. He was a big reason, and he was a part of the process to get those guys in. I understand it. It's, Bo Ryan was the head coach when they first started it. I get that. But Greg Gard was still with the program and was still a lead recruiter and a big recruiter for those guys. It's not like he was coming from some other state program, different level, and not familiar with them at all. But I understand where that was coming from. And I think for some, that's going to be always a knock on Gard, is for some who maybe are not on the Greg Gard bandwagon or on the Greg Gard train, they're going to point to that he didn't get to a Sweet 16 without his quote-unquote his own guys. But I'm sure there'll still be some more finger-pointing and blame to go to Greg Gard for this game against BYU. I'm not a part of that. Me personally, I'm not. But I'm you got the Big Ten Conference now moving forward. Iowa's got a new coach. They just hired the Drake head coach. So Drake, who advanced to the round of 32 for the first time since 1971. Indiana's got a new head coach. Bringing in the head coach from West Virginia, who just felt they should have been in the tournament. Like, Gophers are still looking first, but that might be the Colorado State head coach. So, I mean, Big Ten, you look at some of these new voices coming in at head coach, still going to be a tough conference. I think it's still going to be an incredibly tough conference to get out of, and I'm curious to see what this offseason is going to look like for the Badgers in terms of, hitting the transfer portal, maybe trying to get some guys in, but also keeping some of their own guys that were pivotal players, like a Blackwell. I think right now that's probably your biggest recruiting pitch is keeping him there. Now, again, I don't know if it's talked about or if he's thought about. That's the worry I think we all have now as college fans, is if once the season's over with, are the guys going to leave? Are they going to cash in elsewhere? It's not going to the draft necessarily anymore. It's, are they going to cash in at a different program for NIL? I hate that feeling. I know I'm not the only one, but I hate that feeling.